Grace and peace. Hello, my good people. Thank God for you. Day number 6. We're at day 6 of our consecration 2024. It's been a blessing. The Lord has really been ministering to me, and I know I can speak for others as well. I've gotten testimonies how the Lord is just doing some things in our lives, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful. Hey, I'm sorry I'm bummed up. I got on a sweatshirt. I was doing some work here around the house, and just wanted to stop and thank God for day 6 as we're growing, we're thriving, and presenting kingdom. That's what we're in consecration about. So I pray that you're being blessed. I pray that the hand of the Lord will be on your life. And I want to talk about our focus today, uncompromised protection. You know, I remember growing up. And I used to hear my parents pray and other older adults pray, my grandparents. And part of their prayer would always be, Lord, thank you for keeping us from danger seen and unseen. And I was like, okay, I got it. And as I got older, I began to come into the knowledge and the understanding of the fact that there are some things God keep you from that you're just not aware of. There's some spiritual things that God keeps us from, as well as some natural things. I remember growing up, and I'm just going to be quite honest about it. My mom was very protective of Tim and I, especially when we were growing up and Tim played the trumpet, I played the sax. And in our playing sometime, we were around some people that were trying to understand who they were, identity issues. And my mother, sometime when the gig, talking like musician, was local, she and or my dad would be there. Some of these joy nights that Tim and I had to play at, and some of these gospel artists that came in town, my mother would go with us, and Betty wasn't having no issues with nobody messing with her boys. And oh God, I remember one time we were somewhere, and this guy, kept talking to me and Tim, and my mother called us to her and said, I don't want you talking to him. I was like, Mom, what's up? And she said, I don't want you talking to him. I said, okay. And when we got home, she said that gentleman was known as somebody that was a child molester. Now, I'm not saying that child molestation, rape, and I'm not taking none of this lightly, but I'm just telling you, that's something that we had to deal with prevailing in our lives by way of where we went. We were not always around people that loved the Lord and knew the Lord. There were also people that were trying to introduce us to drugs. I'm telling you the truth. Marijuana back then was the drug of choice. And, people people that I was shocked about, gospel artists, preachers. One time we had played up in Carnegie Hall, believe it or not. And gospel artists were back in the room, sniffing, snorting, and inhaling. And, it wasn't a good look at all. No, I'm not talking about this to judge anybody. I'm just saying that the Lord puts people in your life, puts circumstances around you in many arenas that protect you. And it's not always something like what we dealt with. I'm just using that as an example. But the Lord has a way of protecting you. I remember one time I was supposed to preach somewhere. And before me and Pastor Al got married, and this church just wasn't right. It was just something wrong with this church. Come to find out that it was a church that dealt with witchcraft and stuff. And they masked their name as church, but they were into all this craziness. And I was a young preacher. And I had the power to cast stuff out. I'm not running from the devil, but as a 14, 15-year-old young preacher, I was very much busy as a young preacher around afternoon services, programs, youth and young adult, platform. I hate platform services. I wouldn't put nobody through that now. But that's what I was doing when I was younger, learning how to be a preacher. And for some reason, the car kept running hot. Every time we got close to that church, the car kept running hot. It just kept running hot. My dad was getting frustrated because he was like, something wrong. This car was fine today. He went back and forth to work, didn't have no problem. But this was a Friday night worship, and I was called to preach to this Friday night service, and we just couldn't make it, couldn't get there. Then when the car finally stopped running hot, we drove around, had good directions, couldn't find the church. Come to find out that the Lord was protecting us from dealing with that. See, that may seem kind of extreme, but you got to be very aware that things out in this world today, in some cases, are worse than I just talked about. And the Lord has set his precious hand and love and purpose and assignment on your life. And he loves you. He loves me. He even loves the people that ain't doing right. But he will not have you marred and scarred by what can be avoided. So there are times he protects you. He protects you from certain relationships. He protects you from certain crowds, certain cliques you want to run with. And the Lord said, no, I don't want you with that. You'd be surprised at all the things that God protects us from because he loves us. Danger seen and unseen. While you're in consecration, God heightens your sensitivity in the spirit. He starts talking to you about things that he wants you to understand about. And some of those things are maybe areas that he don't want you involved with anymore. Trust the protection of God. Trust the leading of the Holy Ghost. He never steer you wrong. So I'm thanking God today for divine protection. Not just when I get in my car and ride down the street, not just from reckless drivers and folks speeding, not just sitting in the light and right before I pull off, the Holy Ghost says, don't move, which none of that can be minimized. But the Lord protects us all because he loves us so much. I don't take that protection for granted. I don't leave the house without covering my wife, our children, even though they live away from us or will be. You know, I pray for all of our family, and I pray for you because I want you to be protected. So don't undervalue God's protection. Don't let the devil think that there's a demon behind every rock, but at the same time, don't undervalue when the Lord sends warnings and causes you to obey his word. Love you dearly. Day 6. Thank God for the protection of the Lord in consecration.